This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 493, featuring Jim and Jan talking about sand people. Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vasilopoulos, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey everybody, Jan Rutherford, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us a part of your day as we study leaders, and thanks for spending time with us, as always, each and every week for the past 9+ years. And you can find all past episodes, which are evergreen, at theleadershippodcast.com.
Yeah, and this episode is brought to you today by Darley, wonderful company with wonderful people. They support first responders in the military with best-in-class pumps, equipment, and defense assets. You can learn more about them at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
All right. You got an interesting topic for us today, huh, Jeff?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things
And no guest. It's just Jim and Jan.
Just the two of us. So,
All right.
it's going to be good because one of our more popular recent episodes, to our surprise in a way, was our episode 445 on glue guys. And it got a lot of response from people. We had a lot of people reach out to us about that one. A lot of great comments, even recently. And not that we coined the term glue guys, we did not. But where was the article that you found that was on the same topic, glue people?
I can't remember if it's in the Wall Street. I know I sent it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, like, we hit on something or something that's topical or stuff. But, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and part of the conversation was like trying to, lift people up and coach people to the next level. And we were talking about teams. And one of the things I was commenting, I said, sometimes you get rid of the sand in the gears before you can really lift up a team. And, very frequently it ends up being like a person who is just really not a team player, gets in the way. And I kind of, came up with this term sand people, because I was like, you got to get rid of the sand people because they are the sand in the gears that keep it from running smooth. And you got to be really careful because, as a leader, I always see my role as being like the WD-40. Like, how can you, squirt oil on the gears to make them run more smooth? But you can do that if you got sand in the gears. It just makes the problem worse. So you've got to get rid of the sand people. So that was the topic. I thought it'd be interesting, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts, Jan.
Yeah, I have very strong thoughts on this, and I think it's really an interesting global macro topic because, if you think about trends and uncertainty and all that stuff and growing organizations, it's all about people. And, I say all the time, with my construction clients, I think, the future is finding labor that's mobile. I think that's going to be really, really difficult, and finding talent that has, certain skills or whatever that might be. And I saw an article today that said 60% of people in the United States are, not in high value jobs. And we know engagement's 31%. I mean, there's a big rift between what we're seeing with GDP growth, what we're seeing with the stock market, what we're seeing with fulfillment and happiness in the labor market. At the same time, I probably coach someone once a day that you have to uphold the standards. You've got people that are not making your job easier, they're making it harder, they're not pulling their weight. And I say all the time that, do the math. How much does that person cost? Operating cost? How much is the opportunity cost? If it's $100,000 person, that's $8,000 a month cost, not opportunity. And if they're supposed to produce 5-10 times that, that's 80,000 a month they're costing you or sacrificing. And for whatever reason, we're very slow to uphold those standards. And I love the idea of sand people because I say all the time, you've got to have good friction that produces traction, not friction that produces drag.
Yeah.
And so I think you're onto something. And I think, again, I'll throw a little bit of a life bring to people out there, the leaders, is I get it. If getting rid of people is easy for you and you don't lose sleep over it, you're probably a sociopath. I mean, this is hard, and you all have you have a lot of empathy and you care about people and you want to enrich people, but at the same time, everybody's got to carry their water.
Yeah. Well, I think even when you talk about like doing the math, we think about people, it's like, yeah, that's the opportunity cost of an individual. But when I've got someone who's a sand person and they're in the gears of my team, I'm dragging the whole team down, and that
Oh yeah.
math adds up really, really fast. And so, one of the things I know you and I are both on the same page, and maybe it's just because we're older and we've been around the
Mm.
block, or maybe it's just because sometimes, we're not that person who has to make the decision. And I realize I really appreciate you bringing up the empathy that goes into the pain of letting anyone go, because the day it gets easy for you is the day you've kind of lost your soul. So I agree with your statement there. But I know we're very quick to just say, you got to get rid of this person. This person has to go. And a lot of it is because I think we, maybe as third party, outsiders, or maybe it's just the experience, identify them more quickly. And so one of the things that I was thinking about as we were kind of getting ready for this episode, preparing, was like the kinds of characteristics or traits you see that go into when people are really presenting as a sand person. And so two of the things I thought about, and I'm sure you've got some more, is, one is projecting. A lot of times your sand people will be like, oh, they're always talking about what other people aren't doing. And they're always
Yep.
like, and usually if you pay close attention, they'll talk about what other people aren't doing, because that's exactly what they're not doing. And they're just trying to like shift your eyeballs somewhere else because they know there's a problem, and they know subconsciously or not, that problem is them. So they're going to say, these people are doing that thing exactly what I'm doing. So a lot of times when you see people complaining about other people, take a good hard look at what they're doing, check the facts, do the math, see if they're just projecting. The other one is like hoarding power and resources, where you make yourself a choke point, and because you like control, you like being the hero, whatever it is. And a lot of times I think sand people create environments where they are essential, or they're needed, or everything has to go through them. And I think those two are characteristics I know that show up very frequently when I'm doing coaching with other people and doing some analysis, that say like, that person's very likely a sand person. Not saying all the time, like pretty likely. So you need to dig and do more. What have you seen? What kind of things do you see,
Yeah.
Jane?
Yeah. And part of what I was thinking, Jim, was, it's been a little while. We've been doing executive coaching, leadership development, speaking for a while. It's been a minute since we had P&L responsibilities, but I have led 27 leadership expeditions called crucibles over the last 12 years. And I was just reflecting that if there's one person on a crucible that's in any way, displaying a bad behavior, not carrying their weight, anything like that, it affects the whole team. I mean, there is no way for me to have a successful expedition, a great crucible, and when I am driving back from the trip and thinking about it and doing an after action review in my head and think it was a great trip if there's one person, because one person poisons it, and no matter what. And, I was thinking about the ways that that shows up. It could be the quality of their work or productivity. Sometimes that shows up as laziness. They're unreliable or they're not accountable. They don't take ownership. The one that really shows up the most is just poor attitude or lack of engagement, quiet quitting, not getting along with their peers, complaining. If you remember when we went to Patagonia, the veterans on the trip said, that we got to follow the rule of the three C's: no condemning, complaining, or criticizing. And then, there's also sometimes there's integrity issues, not speaking up, or and this is the one that I see really show up a lot, is resistance to feedback or coaching. People that we basically say aren't coachable, they're defensive. So I think those are all subtle ways they show up. And I think the most insidious way is when it shows up as passive aggressive behavior.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You're so dialed in on this. I really love your perspective. And I like that you tied it into the crucibles, because I think that's
Yeah.
a great way to, because you're not just taking a team doing average things, you're having a team that's doing some like things that are out of the ordinary for most people. And not only that, it's, probably a higher stress environment for some. Here's a question I've got for you as you kind of reflect back on all this stuff. So let's say you've got a team, let's just say like 8, 10 people. And on that team, you've got just one sand person. Okay. And maybe the rest of the team is pretty darn good. And like maybe on the rest of the team, you even have like one superstar. Okay. Can the charisma or power or let's say collective of the team overcome the power that the sand person has to bring
Mm.
the rest of them down?
Yeah, great question. One bad person, even if they're a little bad, is way more powerful than the best person for a team. I mean, the slightly bad person can ruin the team, whereas a really extraordinary person, might lift them up. But it's the team collective. And I'll tell you, I'll go back to the most recent crucible. There's a guy on the trip named Dave, a veteran, and super nice guy. And every time we went to get water, Dave was like, "Hey, give me your stuff. I'll get the water for you." And it was to the point where, like, I feel guilty. I appreciate all that. And he later in the evening shared with the team. He goes, "Hey, part of a good team is look for work, look for things to do, and give more than you take." And here was a guy that was constantly looking for work, and I thought that's just remarkable, and it was contagious. And you're thinking, if everybody's looking for work, if everybody's basically looking for things to do to make everybody else's job easier and figure out where their strengths are, Dave could get water, somebody else might be able to gather firewood, whatever it might be. But you think about, does that happen in a remote hybrid environment? you know, where somebody's like, let me,
Point.
hey, it's 3:30 on the East Coast. I'm going to call my peers on the West Coast and just see how they're doing. Is there anything I can help them with? I'm going to say that's probably extremely rare. And it's not the person on the East Coast's fault that they don't do that. I think they don't necessarily have leaders that are advocating for that. They don't have role models that are saying, hey, look for work. And there might not be incentives for them to do that. They might do it and then nobody thanks them for it or appreciates it. And they're like, screw that. I'm not going to help out anymore. So, it kind of goes back to, CEOs have to think about culture every day. Leaders need to think about culture every single day as well. Their microculture. What kind of team do I want to have? And like we learned from McChrystal way back when, he said they got to have a common purpose and a trust. You know, Pretty simple things, hard to achieve without constant maintenance.
Now, I want to dig in a little bit deeper on, one comment, which is, we've got these great members of a team and we have, the weak members, the sand people that can really bring you down, and like
Yeah.
talk about that balance and what that prevents us from doing. Before I ask you this next question, I want to just remind
Yeah.
everyone that we're enjoying our discussion today, courtesy of Darley, trusted by warfighters and firefighters and all our first responders for the highest quality equipment solutions. Learn more about them at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com. So, Jan, talk about, let's say, what sand people inhibit and how they break down, let's say, the lubrication that you're trying to add as a leader or as, a good team member. Like how does that, like, let's talk about even to some degree those opportunity
Yeah.
costs. What do you
Yeah.
lose when you have when you keep a sand person on your team instead of getting rid of them?
Yeah. Well, what we know is A players immediately avoid them. I mean, if there's a person that doesn't work with the team, the first thing they do is they avoid them. I'm going to go around them. I'm not going to work with them. And two, they start looking for another team that is an A team. They expect the leader to uphold the standard. They don't want to work with somebody that's Debbie Downer or whoever that might be. And, there's a lot of them out there. And, again, I think part of it is the leader's responsibility to help people find purpose and meaning. And as we had a past guest talk about mattering, that people need to matter. Um, and, I think that the greatest challenge right now is for leaders to help people find that, you know, if they do work, whatever it is, they get to help people, and it's not just about trading time for money. And I think that's a really important thing because we have so many people disengaged. And I don't care what job people are doing. If you have a job and someone's paying you money in some way, shape, or form, you are helping make other people's lives better. And I was I was at a restaurant today, and we've been there a bunch of times. It's a nice little bakery kind of place, and I realized like the patio and the windows and were just filthy. I mean, it was just filthy. And I was just thinking, like, gosh, there's just where's the pride? Where's the pride in this? And it's not the employee's fault. The management can say, hey, gosh, what do our customers want? They want good food, of course. They want value for their money. They want a nice experience sitting outside enjoying the weather, and they want this to be easy to do business with. Um, well, cleaning a high chair for my grandson was not easy to do business with. I mean, I shouldn't have to clean a high chair to put my grandson in. And it's just those little things. Um, and again, we've all been to Chick-fil-A and other places where it's, this consistent, reliable, great experience. And and there's no secret. I mean, they don't hire the kids that, are unicorns. They hire regular kids and they put them in really good training and they have the right incentives. And that's what we all need. I mean, we all need the right incentives. And I think honestly, I think that's the biggest thing that's amiss is when we say, "Hey, I want these behaviors to happen." Okay, well, how are you going to reinforce those?
Well,
And everybody automatically thinks of money, and it's not money.
yeah.
It's praise and recognition and appreciation.
Well, and I think it's more than that, because I will, I love what you're saying, and I'm glad that you, kind of explained incentives a little bit. Um, I think it's modeling. I think
Yeah,
modeling is
yeah.
just so important because I'll tell you a story from a company I started my professional career at up in Milwaukee, Allen Bradley. There's a guy at the time who was president by the name of Larry Yost. And I didn't always, back then I was young. I thought everyone in senior management was like, like, "Grr," and, and I didn't know any better. And then one day we were walking down this super long hallway because there was this one long hallway that like was the length of the factory to get to the cafeteria. So I was like
Mhm.
walking to the cafeteria and it was later in the evening. So I was like getting dinner and he was walking in front of me and there was almost no one else in the hallway. And he was probably 40 feet in front of me and I was just walking behind him. And I didn't at the time feel the urge to like, oh, I'm going to, go up and, brown nose with the president of the company. I just walking behind him, going to get my
Mm,
dinner because I was working late. And there was like a cigarette butt or something on the floor because this is
mm.
back in the days when people smoked.
Yeah.
And he bent down to pick it up.
Wow.
And
That
for
never
whatever
happens.
reason, that made a huge impact on me. No one was around. I don't even know if he knew I was behind him. He didn't need to clean it up. There's a cleaning crew coming that evening to clean out the whole factory, but he's just like, not on my floor. I ain't to clean
Mm,
this up. And I will tell you that stuck with me so strong. And I was like, he was modeling like good behavior when no one was around, no one was looking, doing the right thing. And on that day, I was like, this guy that I really didn't like a lot, I'm like, maybe I don't love him, but I do respect him. And it really had an impact on me.
wow.
I will tell you that there are people who, have been saying people in my life, I was that good guy. Like I
Yeah.
left maybe one of the best. I've been on a great fortune in my professional career to be on like probably 5 or 6 like super high performance teams, like where we knocked it out of the park. But there was one that I left because we had a sand person on it
Yeah.
and the boss wouldn't get rid of her. And it was like,
Yeah.
you got to get rid of her. And I gave him an ultimatum. I say, it's her or me. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, it's complicated and this and that. I didn't even wait around for him to solve it. I was gone.
Yeah.
And because I got picked up by another team in the company, in like 24 hours. And it's just, I just think people don't understand the costs and the burden that happens when you allow that person to continue, allow your standard to be lowered. What's the saying, Jan? Um,
Yeah.
leadership is, or culture is about the lowest behavior you
You're
can.
you it's your culture becomes the worst behavior you tolerate.
Perfect. Exactly. And that's, I think, exactly why sand people are,
Yeah.
the limiting factor. They're the governor on your success. That's the cost that you really almost can't put a price on. It's sand people are limiting your culture. They are ineffective, a toleration of sub optimal performance, of weakness, and you cannot have a high performance team if you have sand people.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, Jim, I've been a sand person. I know I have. And I was just thinking about it. Like, if I'm really honest, I mean, maybe if we're all honest with ourselves, um, it was oftentimes when I was a young military officer, because I had been enlisted before I was commissioned. So I was very often cynical about things because, the officers, the young officers that were a few years younger than me were very bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, idealistic. And I was, a little bit hardened. And so, I was just thinking about, the pros and cons of cynicism. So if I was coaching someone that's cynical and a wise, a wisecracking person, we know that sometimes that cynicism can promote critical thinking and, being realistic. But at the same time, it would be helpful to help that person understand that can erode trust, morale, blocks innovation, damages relationships, um, and ultimately it undermines leadership. But when I think back to that, nobody pulled me aside and coached me on any of that. It would. I just remember some people turn around and go, "Why?" Because there was a bunch of us that were probably enlisted in the back, making wisecracks, and they're like, "Why are you so cynical?" And and it was, and in reality, it was well because we've seen how it really works. um, but there might be a place for that. But again, I think that's where leadership really has to help people. And again, I don't know if sometimes those same people are showing up as good intention but cynical and unaware of how their behavior is affecting other people. But if I'm really being honest, I know I've been a knucklehead.
Oh, I have too. I mean, they've
Yeah.
got angels here, you know.
Yeah.
And I would like to even go back and say, and I've told this to a number of people. I said, listen, those early days when I had my first management opportunities, yeah, I'm not sure I would have. Yeah, there are probably some people out there on LinkedIn who are like, that guy talks about leadership. Oh my God, what a jerk. And early in my career, yeah, I'll admit it. I learned a lot. I got better over time. And I got the feedback that said like, you're a little too harsh on that person, But I think that's part of the process of maturing, and all we want to do as coaches is help people not make all the mistakes we made, and
Yeah.
maybe get to a good place faster than we did. But I do think it's important to kind of even realize, like, have you ever, and I think this is one of those few absolutes in my life where I've coached someone about getting rid of a sand person, and they were like, I shouldn't have done that. Or did they all feel like lighter than air afterwards? Like, oh my God,
Oh yeah.
the weight of the world was lifted and all the bad things I thought were going to happen didn't happen.
Yeah. Nobody. I've never met anyone that's fired anyone that regretted it. That's never happened. Um, but and again, I will say this, one of the biggest mistakes I made in business was bringing people on, bragging about how great they were. I hired this great talent and then they weren't working out and I kept them around way too long trying to save them, thinking I could fix them instead of basically saying sunk cost, move on. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, the boat's leaking and I have this big anchor and I'm going down with the boat. Um, And so, if I could go back in time, that would be one thing that I would have adjusted. One, um, I wouldn't have bragged about anybody I was bringing on board until they were performing. I would have been real careful not to do that. And I would have had really, really strict parameters about what success metrics look like in the first 30 to 90 days. And either they met them or they didn't. And then, moved on. And, because it's really hard. I mean, in baseball, you're batting 400, you're, 40%, you're doing great. I think in hiring, if you're batting 50, 60%, you're doing exceptional. I don't know anybody that's gotten every hire right. And I think we hang on to people way too long. And part of it is and I see this a lot, especially with small to mid-sized companies that haven't never had formal interview training, is that they really don't have a structured way to approach the interview. It's kind of like, do I like them? Do they like me? They do the job? It's way more than that.
Well, yeah,
It's way
and
more.
it's always like this. We're interviewing for a culture fit, and there's value in that. I mean, you can't bring someone on board who's just like not going to fit culturally within your organization, but that should be like more towards the end. It shouldn't be the interview. I'm a big fan of saying, what are the qualities that separate the qualities that you can teach or the skills you can teach,
Yeah.
the qualities I need to hire. Because, and we've talked about this before, I've talked about this all the time. Like salespeople, I think your number one quality you want to hire for is curiosity. And so
Oh
you
yeah.
need to interview for that. And there's a structured way to do that to find out if someone's got it. Because I can't teach that. Like, if I had unlimited funds and unlimited time, I could teach it. Maybe,
Yep.
maybe. But like, I don't have the time, even in a large business, to be able to teach people to be curious. I can teach them other skills. And so
Yeah.
understanding what is the unteachable and then what is the teachable and hiring for the unteachable. And so that you get a higher percentage, you can get to your 500 batting average. Um, I do think it's important. I think it's interesting. Okay. So we're like in week 6 of the NFL season right now as we're recording this. And there are countless teams that are still playing their number one draft picks, even though they're not performing. Because it's like, well, yeah, we drafted him number one. We got to play him, right? And it's that emotional connection to some type of feeling that's just like, yeah, but we put a number one draft pick on this person. And if they're not performing, they're not performing. And, it's when we let the emotions get in the way of the statistics, the math. And I think it's interesting that even in a business, let's just take the NFL as a business, where the statistics are like better than any statistics you can get in any business we've got. Okay. You don't have a business that can tell you, here's my accountant. My accountant has a power ranking of this. Here's my, CFO. They have a power ranking of this. You're not going to find that in any other business except for maybe in sales. But even in sales, it's like still sketchy to some degree compared to the NFL. And people hang on to the emotional connection with draft picks. And so it's a tough thing to do. So I don't want to trivialize the difficulty, but I think if you can identify your sand people quickly, and get them off your team. It's not that they're bad
Yeah.
people. They're just not right for your team. And
Right.
maybe they're going to be fine on a different team. And so, but I think that's like what glue guys are essential. And, I feel bad that they get forgotten and people don't compensate them and they don't reward them and don't realize how valuable they are. But even your best glue guy in the world can't overcome the drag that is instituted by a sand person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to do a shout out to a book called Top Grading: How Leading Companies Win by Hiring, Coaching, Keeping the Best People by Brad Smart. Um, it's a great book and it really lays out a great hiring process. And to your point, they outline things that are easy to change, like you know, um, political savvy, goal setting, running meetings, and then things that are really hard, like energy, passion, ambition, tenacity. And anyway, it's a great way that lays out how to go about hiring, and I just can't recommend that enough since we're talking about it. It's interesting because we're talking about seeing people, and as I think about this, Jim, it's like, well, first, you got to make sure you hire the right people. Second, when they come on board, you got to make sure you let them know what the expectations are. And then as they're going through, they need to know where they stand. Are they meeting or not meeting the expectations? And if they're meeting them, there should be consequences. And if they're not meeting them, there should be consequences. And I think that's really what we're talking about is we're talking about hiring people. We're talking about onboarding them with clear expectations, and we're talking about developing them. And either they develop or we help them market their resume elsewhere. I mean, that's really it. And we owe that to the team, to the organization, to ourselves. And we're probably doing that person a favor because if if they're not doing a great job, they're probably not happy. If they're not happy, they're not doing a good job. There's for some reason it's not a fit. And again, if we pay people that aren't getting the job done, then they're either a charity case or they are a thief. I mean, again, if it's $100,000 person, you pay them $8,000 a month, and they're not doing what they're paid to do. Argue with me that that's either charity or they're a thief. Like, because again, you give them money because there's supposed to be a return for it. All of us get money because there's a return. We're supposed to provide more value than we cost, every one of us. So, that to me is the thing when I share that with people, it's a little bit sobering. And, again, I would ask anybody listening, argue with me that it's not charity or thievery.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. And I think it's, sometimes these are the cold, hard realities that we just have to face. We can't deny them. We can't shrug away from them. We can't just, find something that we think is like, oh, there's friction here, so I'm going to avoid it.
Yeah.
As a leader, I think we need to be attracted to friction. Friction for both reasons you mentioned. Friction because it gives us traction, and friction because that's where our eyes need to be. We need to be removing resistance. We need to be lubricating the machine. We need to be helping our team be more effective and get the friction that's in their way out of the way, whether it's institutional friction or it's individual friction. Our eyes need to be attuned to those areas so that as a leader, we can allow our teams to succeed by giving them the easiest path forward. Not that it will never be difficult, but there's nothing that a leader should do to make it more difficult for their people. And I think that's, what I'd love to leave everyone with on as a note today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a really good, really great topic. And you and I both spend a lot of time, coaching. And again, I think there's two big buckets. One, we're trying to help people prioritize their time better, to be more strategic, spend time developing people. So there's a time management component. I think the other is, having difficult conversations with people that aren't meeting expectations, whether it's a boss, a peer, a subordinate, a direct report, if you will. But those are all the hard things. And we do ourselves no favor by kicking the can down the road.
No,
So,
never helps. Wine doesn't get
yeah,
better with it. Personal wine doesn't get better with age. If people are not
yeah,
like fine wine.
yeah. And I hope, Jim, our producers for the show to put the show together, I hope that they can find a really good graphic of sand people.
From Star Wars.
So
We might
I'm
attract
just
a whole
thinking of
new
like, I'm thinking
audience.
of like, gosh, I'm thinking of but this goes way back, Dark Shadows kind of a graphic, really
You named
campy.
yourself there, but yeah, I
Yeah,
know exactly what you're talking about with Barnabas.
like real campy, somebody covered in sand, sand people. Um, but I mean, it is a good image of kind of how these people just, they're slother, they're like sloth like, and they just grind in the gears, and it's like, I mean, when you see them, if we have the right image, you see them, and you'll immediately go, oh, this person comes to mind.
I'm thinking the sand people from Star Wars. I'm thinking we may even get
Oh,
an audience, because if we title it right, we might get some Star Wars fans listening in, learning about leadership for the first time, which is great.
Well, if they are Star Wars fans, they know about leadership.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You know, Yoda, there is no try, only do. But
Right.
actually, that reminds me, our good friend of the show, Dean DeCibio, is
Yep.
actually going to be starting up his leadership through the movies
Oh,
videos again. And so I know
good.
I did a fun one on Pulp Fiction with him a while back, and he's going to be doing more of them. This makes me think we need to do a Star Wars one for him. So that'll be good. But I think that's a good time to wrap the
Oh,
show. What do you think?
yeah, and I'll just say one other thing. My new favorite show, speaking of shows, I don't know if you caught it yet. It's on Hulu. It's called Chad. Have you
Chad.
seen it?
No, I haven't.
Chad.
Yeah.
It's about a guy that was a washed up a real jerk quarterback, and then he basically puts on a costume to, be on another team. It is very unsophisticated, but very light, just absolute mindless entertainment. And it's Glenn Powell, is
Well,
the
yeah,
actor.
because you know, he copied that from Eli Manning. I don't know if you ever saw
The
the
Manning guys, the Manning brothers produced the show. They helped coach him and everything.
yeah. Eli did something like that where he actually he was the original Chad Powers. And so
Yeah.
it's very, very funny that what Eli and Peyton did. The
Yeah.
original is hilarious. I do have to watch the show. I didn't realize it was out yet. I knew they were advertising it.
Oh, it's absolutely, I mean, you will not have to use a lot of brain waves to watch the show, but it's a very entertaining. I mean, it's like in this day and age, just a nice escape is a really nice escape.
Well, that's it for the Leadership Podcast today. And the Leadership Podcast,
And the movie reviews. Yeah.
which is great. So I hope you enjoyed that. Let us know if you did or you didn't. We'll maybe add in more later if everyone likes it. But for our listeners, that's all we have for you this week. Please connect with us on social media or at theleadershippodcast.com. And remember, the path of least resistance is the path of the loser. H.G. Wells. It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rafti Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.